Hello and welcome to week 7 of programming in the Forge. This week we're going to learn how to make our own functions, finally, which really comes in handy as you start to write more advanced programs. Now let's begin with the keyword that starts it all, def. The def keyword is short for define, which is exactly what you're doing, defining a function. Defining a function can be broken down into 3 main parts: naming the function, specifying any parameters, and writing the code that the function will process when it is called. Now let's walk through a step-by-step example by writing a greeting function that will say hello to whatever name you give it. We'll start with the keyword def, and we'll call this function greeting. Now if you remember, all functions are followed by an opening and closing parentheses, even in a function definition. So right after greeting, we'll put a open and close parentheses. Inside these parentheses is where we will put what parameters this function should expect. In this case, we want the function to accept any name string and put out a greeting. So what you put as parameter is essentially a variable name, and you'll see why in just a minute here. For the parameter, we'll simply put name. And as with most other keyword statements, we'll end with a colon. At this point, we're in our indented block, which is where we will write the code for what we want this function to do. In this case, we very simply want to print out a greeting. So we'll put print hello, concatenate the name, concatenate how are you today. Notice how we concatenated the parameter name, just like we would a variable. Alright, so we have a basic function definition here. But now what? If I hit run, nothing happens. I thought I should be seeing a greeting print to the console. The reason we don't see anything yet is because we haven't actually called the function yet. We've only defined what it does. Think of the function definition as a blueprint. When we actually use a function, we say that we're calling that function. To do so, we simply use the function name and provide it with any needed arguments. Notice in a function definition, what's in the parentheses is a parameter, and in a function call, it's an argument, though they often get used interchangeably. So here, we'll write greeting Mr. Carlson. Notice that I provided a raw string as an argument. A raw string, or any data type for that matter, simply means a piece of data that has not previously been saved in a variable, or a list, or some other sequence. Now let's run this now and see what happens. Great, I see my greeting. Now let's talk about what happened though. When the interpreter read the def statement, it finished reading that line alone just to get the function name. It didn't actually read through the indented block. It skipped down past the indented block to continue with the program, where it saw the function being called. At this point, the computer stores the argument, Mr. Carlson, in memory, and the interpreter goes back to the definition line and sees that it indeed expected one argument. Mr. Carlson is then more or less saved in the name variable. Now the interpreter will actually go into the indented block for the function and run the code there. In this case, it will simply print a string concatenated with whatever is in the name variable, Mr. Carlson. We have successfully called the greeting function. Worth noting is that you can give a function more than one parameter or argument. To do so, you simply separate the names of the parameters by commas in the function definition, like so. Let's add another parameter called day. We'll also change our greeting string to say, hello, name, have a nice day. Now if we run what we have so far, we'll get an error letting us know that the greeting function expected 2 arguments, but only got 1. In our function call, let's add the second argument as a string, Saturday. Now when we run, we'll see the function called successfully and the correct string print to the console. The last really important thing to understand about functions is their ability to return value. If all functions could do is print stuff to the console for us, they wouldn't be very useful. Functions are really helpful when you can have them crunch some code for you that you would otherwise have to write out from scratch each time. If you ever find yourself copy and pasting the same chunk of code over and over again, you're probably in the market for a useful function. Except if we're not printing something, what do? They can take in data via parameters, crunch that data, and resolve to some new data by returning value. Let's take a look. Let's change one simple thing about our greeting function. Instead of printing the string, let's return it with the keyword return. Then let's click run and see what happens. Well, I didn't get any errors, but nothing popped up in the console, so what happened? To illustrate what return does, let's wrap our greetings function inside of a print function. Now you can see the string printed to the console. When you nest functions like this, the innermost function always resolves first. In this case, the greeting function ran first and returned a string. So essentially, that whole function inside of print resolved to the string, "Hello, Mr. Carlson, have a nice Saturday," which was then printed. So peeling away the layer of abstraction, this line ends up behaving exactly the same way as this line would. The last quick thing we need to go over is the pass keyword. Pass is used when you want nothing to happen, even if it's expected that something should happen in an indented block. For example, in every instance that we see an indented block, if, elif, else, while, for, and def, instead of writing any code to run, we could just write pass to let the computer know we don't want anything to happen. If we were to leave it blank, then we would get an error stating that an indented block was expected but not found. Now, pass can be very useful for testing purposes or as a placeholder until you know exactly what you want to do with an indented block. And there you have it. You understand now the fundamentals of functions. There are some more advanced topics that we'll cover later in the course, but the knowledge you gained today will take you a long way on its own. Happy programming, and we'll see you next time in the Forge.